Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're all located. My name is Amy Rotman. I'm the editor of the essay and the content director for One-to-One Group. So I'm joined today by Peak Rare Earths to give us the latest on what's happening with their team. So this morning, Peak announced a binding offtake agreement and strategic EPC and funding MOU with its major shareholder, Shenghe. This is a rather significant milestone for the company and lays the foundation for Peak in moving its Ngualla project into production. So to tell you a bit more about the update, we're joined by Peak's Executive Chairman, Russell Scrimshaw, and Chief Executive Officer, Barden Davis. We anticipate that the preceding presentation will take about 15 minutes, after which we'll open the floor to questions from attendees. So please feel free to submit the questions anytime throughout the presentation using the Q&A functionality, and we will address them following the presentation. So to kick things off, Russell, I would like to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Welcome. This is a major milestone for our company. It's a defining partnership that, as this slide says, underpins the Ngualla project. We've got an offtake agreement for 7 years with all the material sold at market and a partner, Shenghe, who needs our material to replace their major current source of supply, being MP materials. And in addition, indicate a willingness to fully fund our project via this MOU through a project level interest in the company to achieve that. So it is a major step forward for the company. And I know many of you have waited such a long time for this kind of progress. If we can move to the next slide, please. I'll draw your attention to the disclaimer that you can see on the screen and urge you to read it. And if I can just make a couple of opening remarks on the next slide, please, and then I'll hand over to our CEO, Barden Davis. So, as I mentioned, this is a defining partnership. Shenghe, as some of you may not know, is a public company. It's not a state-owned enterprise. They're listed on the Shanghai Stock Exchange, and I would urge you to understand that they need this partnership too. We believe it is a transformative partnership for all of us. It will underpin the future for us, but also for Shenghe as well. As I said, they're a listed company, and they need a consistent source of supply for their business. It provides Peak with an integrated offtake development and funding pathway. We believe this will be the major funding round for Peak. We are doing quite a lot of work with Shenghe and our own team through the FEED process over the next several months. And we believe it is going to lead us to the point where we have a fully funded offer on the table from Shenghe. They have a strong market position. They're technically very advanced, as MP Materials, I'm sure, would confirm, and they have a very strong financial position. And as I mentioned earlier, they do need to replace their supply that's coming from MP today, which, when MP turns on their refinery in the not too distant future, will not be available to be shipping their concentrate to Shenghe, and we are the natural successor for them in that space. It builds on the substantial work myself and the rest of our team have done in de-risking our company over the last year. We've added several major and very experienced board members onto our board, as well as a number of key executives, including a project director of outstanding capability into the company. And I would also add that Tanzania, the country, has done a lot to de-risk itself as a mining jurisdiction as well over the last couple of years, and that culminated in the visit of the US Vice President there only a couple of months ago, Kamala Harris, and as one of the major levels of focus and de-risking into the country, we've seen people like BHP putting significant amounts of money into the Kabunga nickel project in recent times, and a number of other graphite and similar projects, gold projects, getting underway. This, we think, lays the foundation for Peak to be positioned as the next major rare earth player. Make no mistake, we aim to be a major. We believe we have the material and the capability to be able to do that. And we hope we will, over time, become another Linus or another MP material. Remember, our material is bastonosite material, not monazite, which many of the other juniors in this space are looking to mine. And bastonosite is a kind of rare earth that fits perfectly into the Chinese refining and processing model. It also happens to fit what MP are doing in the United States. So I draw your attention to the comments of Mr. Huang Ping, who's the Deputy Executive Chairman and the second major shareholder in Shenghe. And he regards the project as the premier undeveloped rare earth project in the world. We've been saying this for quite a while, but it's nice to have the support of a significant international player in agreeing with that position and signing on the dotted line to become more deeply involved with us as we go forward. So, Barton, if I can go over to you now and take us through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Russell, and good afternoon, everyone. A very exciting time for Peak. So the execution of this offtake agreement and development and funding MOU with Shenghe, as Russell has said, is a landmark milestone for Peak. And we are now very much positioned to become the world's next major rare earth producer. Our Nagwala rare earth project in Tanzania, as Russell has outlined, has already been substantially de-risked from a technical, from a regulatory and country perspective, and from a leadership perspective. With the execution of these agreements, we now have a pathway to an integrated offtake, EPC, development and funding solution that provides a take-or-pay offtake for 100% of our concentrate, that requires Shenghe to provide a funding and EPC solution, that limits debt and equity funding requirements by providing Shenghe with an opportunity of acquiring a material non-controlling project interest. In terms of our binding offtake agreement with Shenghe for 100% of our concentrate production, it very much puts us in a unique position. So key elements of this offtake agreement include 100% of our concentrate production while preserving some optionality to move further downstream into a mixed rare earth carbonate or a refined oxide. From a credit perspective, we benefit from a take or pay structure with Shenghe, the largest importer of rare earth concentrate into China. Pricing is linked to international rare earth market indices. We've got flexibility embedded in the agreement where we can extend an initial 7-year term by mutual agreement. There are some conditions precedent like Peak shareholder approval and the approval of the Tanzanian Mining Commission. Importantly, we've included a termination right where project funding is not achieved within 6 months of FEED. So that creates a very strong incentive for Shenghe to deliver a timely and attractive funding solution. It also enables Peak to preserve strategic optionality in the event that that funding is not forthcoming. So the Nagwala project will produce a high-grade concentrate that is extremely attractive feedstock for Chinese refiners. So key points of attraction with respect to our concentrate: it's got very low levels of radionuclides and acid-consuming elements. It's got a very high NdPr ratio. Bastonosite, it's a bastonosite mineralization that's very much aligned to the Chinese refining sector and capacity. And as Russell says, it mentioned before, it avoids the higher costs associated with processing monazite product. Nagwala's concentrate supply is also very strategic. Currently, 100% of MP Materials bastnasite concentrate has been going into the Chinese market. Now, with MP in the process of moving further downstream into the production of an NdPr oxide, Ngualla is uniquely positioned to fill that market void. From a pricing perspective, the way that the pricing formula works, it's reference to the price of underlying contained rare earth elements, and then applies a series of deductions for things like that, refinery recoveries, costs, and margins. So it's a very similar in form to the MP Materials formula. If you look at the chart on the right-hand side, you can see that recoveries, payabilities increase with price and grade. We're currently targeting a plus 45% grade concentrate, but we're also working very hard at the moment around some further optimizations to the flow sheet that would further boost the grade of the concentrate. So complementing this binding offtake agreement is a strategic and non-binding MOU that supports a pathway to an integrated offtake development and funding solution. So key elements of this MOU include Shenghe providing a fixed price and turnkey EPC solution, Shenghe sourcing a project funding solution in a form that's acceptable to Peak, the potential for Shenghe to subscribe for a material non-controlling project investment that would materially reduce our debt and equity funding requirements. The other points I would make is that there's also a very strong commitment by Peak and Shenghe to work together to further optimize the Ngualla project, to further decrease our capex and development costs, to further reduce our operating costs and increase concentrate grade and recoveries. The other point to highlight is that under this MOU, Peak would retain a strong controlling position in the Ngualla rare earth project. So our integrated offtake development, EPC and funding pathway is supported by two very strong partners, Shenghe and Bigram. Shenghe is a Chinese privately owned enterprise listed on the Shanghai Stock Exchange, and we believe uniquely positioned to add value to the Ngualla project. So Shenghe is our largest shareholder. They've already invested in excess of $45 million into Peak. They've got a plus $3 billion market capitalization. They're the largest importer of rare earth concentrate into China, internationally recognized for their rare earth expertise, particularly when it comes to the processing of bastnasite mineralization, which is exactly what we have at Ngualla. They've also got a very strong track record of cooperating with MP Materials in the US, which has a US $4 billion market cap. So they own an 8% shareholding in MP Materials and have provided a combination of offtake, technical and funding support. So Shenghe has also been taking 100% of MP's concentrate into the Chinese market, with MP moving downstream into the production of an NdPr oxide. This will remove about 15% of the global supply of rare earth concentrate. In partnership with Shenghe, we are now uniquely positioned to fill that market void. On the right-hand side of the chart, Shenghe has indicated that a preference to partner with Bigram as an EPC partner. And you can see from that slide, Bigram has a very strong track record, not only in rare earths, but also in developing large-scale mining projects in Africa. So both the offtake agreement and MOU have been structured to achieve an actionable and attractive funding solution. The offtake agreement is conditional upon project funding within 6 months of FEED. And under the MOU, Shenghe is required to provide an acceptable funding solution. Our first objective is to work with Shenghe to further optimize the project and seek to further reduce development and CapEx. We will then evaluate the potential for Shenghe to acquire a significant non-controlling project interest via our UK subsidiary that would materially reduce the quantum of any debt and limit the need for Peak to raise equity. To the extent that there is some debt required, we would see that as structured as a combination of prepayment, shareholder loan, or funding from Chinese commercial and policy banks. So the key benefits of this approach is that it minimises the need for future equity raisings by Peak. It utilises the balance sheet strength of Shenghe, and it reduces the requirement to rely upon third-party funding. Our timeline and execution strategy has been updated to reflect the offtake agreement and the MOU. So some of the key points to note here is that FEED is well underway with final reports scheduled in the month of November. We're going to be running a dual-track EPC, EPCM approach with a final decision on a preferred execution model in December. The timing of a final investment decision has been moved to May next year to coincide with the cutoff date for financing under our offtake agreement. Post that final investment decision, we'd be looking at delivering the project within a 2-year period. So that concludes the formal part of the presentation. This is a very exciting time for Peak. I look forward to updating you all on the progress in moving this world-class rare earth project into development and construction. Thank you.
Thank you to the team for that really interesting presentation. So now to get into the Q&A, just a reminder to the audience that you can type in any questions you have for the team into the Q&A box, and we will get to those. So the first question that came in from the audience asks, the announcement mentioned the possibility of Shenghe taking a significant non-controlling interest in Nguala Group UK Limited. Are you able to go into details of what that might entail?
So look, ultimately, that will be determined by, one, where we end up in terms of development costs and EPC arrangements. We've been very clear to the market that it is important that Peak retains a majority interest at a project level. In terms of the bookends, we have an 84% stake in the project. The government has a 16% stake in the project. We are very focused on maintaining, a plus 51% stake in the project. So I guess they're the parameters that we're operating with. Russell, I'm not sure if you've got any comments you'd like to add to that.
Yes, well, we'll see how the numbers work out after we work with Shenghe through the FEED process, and they look at our flow sheets, look at how they can bring their intellectual property to bear on the project, and that will determine, the cost and development timeframe, which, by the way, they seem to think is going to be faster and cheaper than we had thought. But let's see how that works through. But I can tell you, absolutely, we remain in absolute control of the project, and at the parent company level, we will have a owners team oversighting the project. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got an outstanding project director, Lello Degrassi, who's built many major projects throughout Africa and is already on the ground and working away on our behalf. And we were there with him a couple of weeks ago in country when we had a celebration on the signing of the framework agreements and special mining license with the Nguala village. So I think the message is we will always remain in absolute control of this project.
The next question that's come in from the audience is, does Peak see a risk of Tanzania banning the export of rare earth concentrate?
No. So we went through a very lengthy negotiation process with the government around a framework agreement. That framework agreement provides us with the capacity to export rare earth concentrate. What I would also say is that under the leadership of the Tanzanian president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, we've seen a big shift in the country's approach to foreign investment and the mining sector. So the President has been very active offshore. She's addressed the floor of the United Nations. She spent a lot of time marketing the country in the US, Europe, the Middle East, and China. The message is the country is open for business. We've noticed a very significant change in terms of dealing with the government. It's now a much more collegiate, commercial approach. We've recently had a relationship manager appointed by the Ministry of Minerals, whose sole focus is to work with us in terms of progressing our project. Russell mentioned the celebration that we had in the community. That was attended by over 4,000 people. We had the deputy Minister for Minerals address the crowd. There is a huge amount of support at a community and at a national level behind this project.
Yeah, and if I can just add that they are now our partner, the government. They own 16% of us, so it's absolutely in their interest to work alongside of us to develop this project and to start exporting our material as soon as we reasonably can. At the same time, we've agreed with the government that we will look at what we can do downstream in country that's economically viable, and we will undertake that work alongside of the government with an independent analysis in the near future. But the key thing is the government's our partner here. They own 16% of the local subsidiary company, which is called Mamba Mining, and a future perhaps refining company called Mamba Refinery. And and they've appointed several board members onto those two companies alongside of our majority interest. So look, we've got good access to all major government people. The President was there when we signed the agreement. So I think the risk of us being banned is very close to zero, if not zero.
We have more questions that have come in from the audience. So the first is, the Peak share register is largely small cap investors. How is the company going to get institutional shareholders onto the register?
So, look, it is one of our key strategies. We have a number of long institutions on the register. We are sort of working around our IR campaign at the moment. Part of our strategy is to increase our activities offshore. We've found that we've been getting very good traction in the UK, as well as in Hong Kong, and to a lesser extent in North America. I think for a lot of institutions, there was a reluctance to come in until that framework agreement and special mining license had been granted. Now that that's behind us, now that we've sort of got a clear pathway to getting this project into construction and development. And then I think the other sort of point is that through this sort of funding arrangement, we've now got an opportunity to minimise the need for future equity raisings. It becomes a very compelling proposition, I think, not only for institutional investors, but also for retail investors as well.
So another question we have is Shenghe open to a refinery or separation facility in Tanzania? So
one of the things that we have discussed with the government is the potential of developing an intermediate, in effect, an intermediate refinery in country. So something like a mixed rare earth carbonate refinery. We've committed to the government that we'd do a feasibility study on that, looking at its viability. Shenghe has said that they would be very supportive of that. They actually see that as being something that could be quite strategic, because something like that could not only be used by us, but it could become a bit of a rare earth processing hub for other projects in Tanzania, as well as in Eastern and Southern Africa. Whether it would be feasible to go all the way to a refined oxide, well, that's something that we need to do a lot more work on. But certainly our ambition over time is to move further downstream.
And if I can add, if you look at Shenghe's recent offshore investments, besides the MP investment and the investment in us, they have several others in Vietnam, Australia. They've been very supportive of us looking to go further downstream, either in country or elsewhere outside of China. And if you remember, when they did buy their 19.8% interest in us, at that time, the strategy was to develop the refinery in Teesside in the UK. So they've always been fully aware of that opportunity and very supportive of it.
All right, sounds good. So we are running out of time. I think we have time to answer one last question from the audience. And so MP recently amended its ore supply agreement to include delivering ore to Shenghe's 90% owned Vietnam operation. Is this something that PEK can do?
So that, as I understand it, that facility doesn't have the capability of taking a concentrate, but certainly to the extent that we were to go further downstream, that Vietnam facility could certainly be an option.
So that brings us to the end of our time for this webinar. If there, in case you have any further questions for the Peak Rare Earths executive team, definitely feel free to reach out to the team or to the one-to-one group, and we can put you in touch with them. So I'd like to thank Barden and Russell for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
All right, thank you.